The year was 1979, and rain fell like punishment from the heavens. It was the kind of night when even the moon refused to show its face, when thunder rolled across the small town of Milford, echoing like the grief of 1,000 forgotten souls. At the edge of town stood St. Mary's Orphanage, a stone building with peeling paint and windows that sighed in the wind. Inside, a young nurse named Clara Bennett fought sleep as she rocked a crying infant. The storm had raged for hours, and the power had flickered twice already. She was used to sleepless nights. St. Mary's was a place where time and hope both moved slowly. But that night was different. At exactly 11:47 p.m., a sound broke through the thunder, a faint cry, carried by the wind. Then another, and another. It wasn't one baby. It was many. A chorus of desperation that didn't belong in the middle of the storm. Clara froze. For a heartbeat, she thought she was imagining it. But when the sound came again, raw and piercing, she grabbed her coat and a lantern, heart pounding in her chest. The cries led her to the front steps of the chapel, where the rain came down in angry sheets. There, wrapped in 9 identical brown blankets, lay 9 newborn girls, their tiny faces slick with rain and tears, their bodies trembling in the cold. For a moment, Clara couldn't move. She just stood there, the storm soaking her through, staring at the impossible sight before her. 9 babies, left in the night. No note, no names, no sign of who had brought them. She shouted for help, and within minutes, the other sisters rushed out. Sister Agnes, the head nun, pale and wide-eyed, and Mother Beatrice, clutching her rosary as if it might explain this miracle or curse. Together, they carried the bundles inside, laying them on blankets near the fire. The room filled with cries, high-pitched, overlapping, almost musical in their chaos. The sisters worked frantically, drying, warming, and feeding them with trembling hands. When the last baby finally stopped crying, the orphanage fell into a stunned silence. The fire crackled softly, casting shadows on the 9 small faces that now slept in peace. Who could have done this? Clara whispered. Who leaves 9 children, all at once? Mother Beatrice stared at the sleeping infants, her face unreadable. Someone who loved them enough not to watch them die, she said finally. Or someone who feared them enough to let them go. By morning, the local police arrived. 2 weary officers in damp coats who seemed more confused than concerned. They questioned the nuns, took notes, and stared at the infants as though they were witnesses in their own mystery. The story spread through Milford like wildfire. 9 babies left on church steps. Couldn't have been one woman, maybe a cult. They all looked the same age. Maybe even sisters. Reporters came, flashing cameras that frightened the infants. The town buzzed with curiosity, but no one came forward. No missing mothers. No witnesses. No answers. As weeks turned into months, the story faded from the headlines. The babies became a legend whispered about in the town market. The Stormborn sisters, the Church 9, the orphanage miracle. But inside St. Mary's, they were simply called the girls. And though they had no names, they had voices, and those voices soon filled every corridor of the orphanage. The orphanage was overcrowded and underfunded. Paint peeled from the walls, food supplies came sporadically, and the sisters often worked through the night. Yet, against all odds, the 9 girls thrived. Clara, who had found them, became their de facto guardian. She named them after virtues she hoped would define their lives: faith, hope, charity, grace, mercy, patience, joy, peace, and love. They shared a crib for the first year, huddled together for warmth. When one cried, the others stirred, a chain reaction of need and comfort that the nuns could never quite explain. They are connected, Sister Agnes would whisper, as if one soul was divided into 9 bodies. By age 2, the girls could walk, usually hand in hand. By 3, they could sing together in eerie harmony. Visitors would pause and listen as 9 small voices sang hymns with such purity that even the jaded groundskeeper stopped to weep. But not everyone saw beauty in their bond. Some whispered that the girls were unnatural. That kind of sameness isn't normal, muttered townsfolk. Look at their eyes, too knowing. When one sister tried to separate them into different sleeping quarters, the girls screamed for hours, inconsolable until they were reunited. After that, they were kept together at all times. Clara often wondered about their mother or mothers. Had she been desperate, hiding from someone? Or had she loved them so much that leaving them was the only way to save them? By the time the girls turned 4, St. Mary's was nearing financial collapse. Donations had dried up. The roof leaked. There were days when the sisters skipped meals to feed the children. The county board threatened closure. Officials came to assess adoptability. They took photos, wrote notes, and frowned. Adopting one is difficult enough, one social worker said. But 9? No one would be foolish enough to try that. When Clara overheard them, something in her heart broke. The girls were inseparable. Their bond was their lifeline. To split them apart would be to erase everything that made them who they were. Still, she knew the truth. If no one stepped forward soon, they would be separated by the system. And that was when fate, in all its strange precision, intervened. It was another rainy Tuesday when Richard Miller's truck broke down a few miles from town. He had no umbrella, no plan, only grief that clung to him like a second skin. 2 years since Anne's passing, his life had become colorless. When he saw the sign for St. Mary's Orphanage, he thought only of finding a phone. But as he stepped into the dim hallway and heard the faint, uneven cries of 9 children, something ancient stirred inside him, recognition. That sound, it wasn't noise. It was a call. Clara met him in the doorway, apologizing for the noise. We're overcrowded, she said, embarrassed. They all came together, 9 girls, left on the steps one night. Richard froze. 9? Together? She led him into the small nursery, and the rest was destiny written in the language of love and grief. The way one baby reached for his sleeve. The way another smiled through her tears. The way silence filled him and then broke. When he whispered, "What if someone took all of them?" Clara thought she'd misheard. But when he said it again, voice trembling but sure, she realized she was witnessing something sacred. That night, as Richard drove home in a borrowed car, his heart felt alive for the first time in years. He didn't yet know the obstacles ahead, the gossip, the bureaucracy, the disbelief, but something within him was immovable. He had found where his love belonged. And at St. Mary's, as the rain eased into dawn, Clara stood by the cribs, whispering softly to the sleeping 9. "You're going home soon," she said. "Not just anywhere, but together." One of the babies stirred, her small hand reaching toward the light filtering through the window. Clara smiled through tears. Maybe, just maybe, the storm that had brought them would be the same one that finally set them free. In her old age, Clara kept a newspaper clipping. "Local man adopts 9 orphaned girls," folded neatly in her Bible. Whenever people asked why she stayed at the orphanage despite the hardship, she'd smile and say, "Because I was there the night love found its way back into the world." But that was only the beginning. For those 9 little girls, once storm-born, now sisters, the real journey was still ahead. How did they grow? What lives did they build? And how did the bond that saved them as children shape the women they became? You'll find out in part 2, how they built their lives, the 9 who defied fate. If you enjoyed the story, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Tales by Nanya for more emotional, dramatic, and life-changing stories. Tell us in the comments, what do you think happened after Richard walked through that door? Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and keep believing in love.